A crumpled silk ribbon lay near her designer heels, the only sign of the struggle that had just ended. From the distance, the low rumble of a private jet's engines vibrated through the air. Kang Tae-seok's plane was touching down. He was home early. Yuna's driver stepped forward, shovel in hand. "Keep going," she commanded, her voice like ice. "Smooth the dirt. Make it look like the landscaping was never touched." She had a welcoming gala to attend. Important business. The life of a child wasn't her concern, only the empire that child stood in the way of. But as she turned to leave, something made her stop, a movement in the soil. The earth twitched barely, a rhythmic pulse beneath the weeping willow, as if the ground were trying to scream. Yuna's eyes narrowed. She didn't look away. She stepped onto the mound, her weight pressing down to silence the movement. Inside the laundry room, Amal Johnson saw everything from the window. Her stomach turned. She watched the woman in the expensive silk gown calmly pat down the dirt with a polished heel, ignoring the muffled thumping coming from beneath the soil. It was the kind of act that took planning. That took a specific kind of hatred. "Oh God," Amal whispered. She waited until the black sedan pulled away toward the airfield, then she sprinted into the moonlight. She reached the mound and fell to her knees. The earth was breathing. A small hand, fingers caked in mud and scratched raw, poked through the surface. It clawed at the air, reaching for a father who was miles away. Amal began to dig frantically, her bare hands tearing at the heavy clay. The soil was cold and heavy, a suffocating blanket designed to silence the innocent forever. Amal didn't feel the grit tearing at her nail beds or the sharp stones cutting into her palms. She was no longer a maid. She was a woman possessed by a singular, frantic purpose. With every handful of earth she hurled aside, the image of Yuna's polished heel pressing down on this very spot burned in her mind. "Not like this," Amal hissed through gritted teeth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "You will not die like this." The deeper she dug, the more the earth seemed to fight back, clinging to the small body it had been forced to claim. Finally, her fingers brushed against something soft, the fabric of a silk pajama top. Amal redoubled her efforts, clearing the dirt from around a small, limp shoulder and pulling the child upward. Rin was a terrifying weight of dead stillness. Her head lollowed back, her mouth and nose clogged with the dark, damp clay of the estate gardens. Amal laid the girl on the grass, the moonlight casting a sickly blue hue over Harin's graying skin. For a heartbeat, the silence of the night felt absolute, like a final verdict. But then Amal's old life, the years spent in white corridors, the rhythm of emergency rooms and the weight of a stethoscope surfaced from the depths of her memory. She didn't panic. She shifted into a cold, clinical precision. She swept her finger through the girl's mouth, clearing the obstruction of dirt. She tilted the small head back, pinching the nose and delivering 2 quick, sharp breaths. "Breathe, Harin. Breathe for your father. Breathe for me." She began chest compressions, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud the only sound against the backdrop of the distant Mafia motorcade winding its way up the driveway. Each press was a defiant strike against Yuna's cruelty. 1 minute passed. 2. The child remained a porcelain doll, broken and cold. Amal leaned down again, her lips against the girl's cold skin, forced air into the lungs one last time, and then a shudder. It was faint, a tiny ripple beneath the ribs. Then came a violent, racking cough. Harin convulsed, her lungs rejecting the grit and inhaling the sharp night air with a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Dark mud spilled from her lips as she fought for oxygen. Amal scooped the trembling child into her arms, pressing her ear to the girl's chest. The heart was racing now, a frantic drumbeat of survival. Harin's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused, fixed on the weeping willow that had almost been her headstone. "I've got you," Amal whispered, wrapping her uniform apron around the freezing girl to trap what little warmth remained. "The miracle is done, little one. Now we have to disappear." In the distance, the heavy iron gates of the estate groaned open. The boss was home. But as Amal looked at the muddy, gasping child in her arms, she knew the real battle hadn't even begun. The headlights of the returning motorcade swept across the high stone walls of the estate like searchlights, slicing through the gloom of the gardens. Amal pressed herself and the shivering child deeper into the recess of the servants' entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear the heavy thud of car doors and the low, urgent murmur of men's voices. Among them, the sharp, authoritative baritone of Kang Tisiak cut through the night air, thick with a jagged, terrifying grief. "Find her," his voice boomed, vibrating with a raw, dangerous edge that made Harin flinch violently in Amal's arms. "If a single hair on my daughter's head is harmed, I will burn this city to the ground." Amal looked down at the girl. Rin was staring at the door, her eyes wide with a haunting recognition of her father's voice, but she didn't cry out. She couldn't. Her throat was raw from the earth, and her spirit was fractured by the image of the woman who had put her there, the woman currently standing at Tisiak's side, likely feigning tears. Amal knew that if she stepped into the light now, the chaos would be absolute. Tisiak, in his current state of blind, bloodthirsty rage, might accidentally lead the wolf straight to the wounded lamb. He trusted Yuna, and until that trust was shattered with cold, hard proof, the truth was a death sentence. Moving with the silence of a shadow, Amal carried the child through the labyrinthine service corridors toward the old servant quarters, a forgotten wing of the mansion where the air tasted of dust and old memories. She entered a small, windowless room hidden behind a heavy oak linen press. It was cramped and cold, but it was invisible. She laid Harin on a narrow cot, stripping away the mud-caked pajamas and wrapping her in a clean, oversized wool sweater. The child's tremors were constant, a physical manifestation of the trauma locked behind her silent lips. Amal knelt beside her, cleaning the remaining dirt from the girl's fingernails with a damp cloth, her nurse's hand steady even as her mind raced. "You're a ghost now, Harin," Amal whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Just for a little while. Your father's heart is a storm right now, and we cannot walk into a storm." Above them, the house groaned as the search intensified. Heavy boots thundered across the floorboards of the main hall, and the distant sound of furniture being overturned echoed through the vents. Tisiak was a man who believed control equaled safety, and now that he had lost control, he was becoming the very monster the underworld feared. Amal stayed in the dark, clutching the child's small, cold hand, realizing that she was now hiding the daughter from the father to save them both. Outside, the boss was screaming for a miracle, never realizing it was breathing just beneath his feet. The shadows of the medical wing were long and sharp, illuminated only by the rhythmic, cold flash of the security cameras' infrared sensors. Amal moved with the precision of a thief, her breath held tight in her chest. She reached for the cabinet containing sterile saline and concentrated glucose, essential for the girl's recovering lungs and crashing blood sugar. Her fingers had just closed around a vial of epinephrine when the click of a safety being disengaged echoed through the sterile room. "The help is usually more interested in the silver, Amal. Why are you raiding the pharmacy?" Amal froze. Park Minyi stood in the doorway, his broad frame blocking any exit. The head of security looked like a statue carved from obsidian, his battle-scarred face illuminated by the faint glow of the drug refrigerator. He didn't raise his weapon, but his hand rested on the grip with a casual, terrifying familiarity. Amal didn't flinch. She turned slowly, clutching the supplies to her chest. "The silver is useless to me, Minyi. I need these to keep a heart beating." Minyi stepped into the room, his eyes scanning her, the mud beneath her fingernails, the frantic pulse in her neck. "The boss is tearing the city apart. He thinks the triads took her. He's currently ordering a hit on 3 different rival families." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous vibration. "If you're hiding what I think you're hiding and she dies on your watch, there isn't a place on earth Tisiak won't find you." "She isn't going to die," Amal whispered, her voice hardening with the authority of her hidden past. "But she will if you keep me standing here. She was buried, Minyi, alive, and it wasn't a triad who held the shovel. The security chief's eyes flickered. He had served Tisiok for 2 decades. He knew the smell of a lie, and he didn't smell it now. He thought of Seo Yuna, the woman who had spent months trying to replace the loyal house staff with her own hired hands. "Prove it," Minyi demanded. Amal reached into her pocket and pulled out the pink silk ribbon, still crusted with the dark, damp earth of the garden. "This was in the dirt. I saw her, Minyi. I saw the fiancée press her heel into the grave." Minyi took the ribbon, his jaw tightening until the bone nearly broke the skin. The silence in the room was heavy, the air thick with the realization of a betrayal that could topple an empire. Slowly, he reholstered his weapon. "The cameras in the old quarters have been looped for the last hour," he said, his voice now a tactical murmur. "I did it because I noticed you sneaking around. I thought you were a spy." He stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. "Go, save the girl. I'll feed the boss enough false leads to keep him away from the servant's wing. But if this is a game, Amal, I'll be the one to bury you." "It's no game," Amal said, slipping past him into the dark. "It's a war, and we're the only army the princess has." The uneasy pact was sealed in the dark, a maid and a soldier standing between a child and the wolf in the master bedroom. The shadows of the medical wing were long and sharp, illuminated only by the rhythmic, cold flash of the security cameras' infrared sensors. Amal moved with the precision of a thief, her breath held tight in her chest. She reached for the cabinet containing sterile saline and concentrated glucose, essential for the girl's recovering lungs and crashing blood sugar. Her fingers had just closed around a vial of epinephrine when the click of a safety being disengaged echoed through the sterile room. "The help is usually more interested in the silver, Amal. Why are you raiding the pharmacy?" Amal froze. Park Minyi stood in the doorway, his broad frame blocking any exit. The head of security looked like a statue carved from obsidian, his battle-scarred face illuminated by the faint glow of the drug refrigerator. He didn't raise his weapon, but his hand rested on the grip with a casual, terrifying familiarity. Amal didn't flinch. She turned slowly, clutching the supplies to her chest. "The silver is useless to me, Minyi. I need these to keep a heart beating." Minyi stepped into the room, his eyes scanning her, the mud beneath her fingernails, the frantic pulse in her neck. "The boss is tearing the city apart. He thinks the triads took her. He's currently ordering a hit on 3 different rival families." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous vibration. "If you're hiding what I think you're hiding and she dies on your watch, there isn't a place on earth Tisiok won't find you." "She isn't going to die," Amal whispered, her voice hardening with the authority of her hidden past. "But she will if you keep me standing here. She was buried, Minyi, alive, and it wasn't a triad who held the shovel." The security chief's eyes flickered. He had served Tisiok for 2 decades. He knew the smell of a lie, and he didn't smell it now. He thought of Seo Yuna, the woman who had spent months trying to replace the loyal house staff with her own hired hands. "Prove it," Minyi demanded. Amal reached into her pocket and pulled out the pink silk ribbon, still crusted with the dark, damp earth of the garden. "This was in the dirt. I saw her, Minyi. I saw the fiancée press her heel into the grave." Minyi took the ribbon, his jaw tightening until the bone nearly broke the skin. The silence in the room was heavy, the air thick with the realization of a betrayal that could topple an empire. Slowly, he reholstered his weapon. "The cameras in the old quarters have been looped for the last hour," he said, his voice now a tactical murmur. "I did it because I noticed you sneaking around. I thought you were a spy." He stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. "Go, save the girl. I'll feed the boss enough false leads to keep him away from the servant's wing. But if this is a game, Amal, I'll be the one to bury you." "It's no game," Amal said, slipping past him into the dark. "It's a war, and we're the only army the princess has." The uneasy pact was sealed in the dark, a maid and a soldier standing between a child and the wolf in the master bedroom. The incense in the private shrine was cloying, a thick sandalwood shroud that failed to mask the scent of cold rain clinging to Tisyok's coat. Yuna stood before the altar, her silhouette a study in fragile elegance. She wore a hanbok of deepest obsidian, her face scrubbed clean of color, eyes rimmed with a redness that looked like a week of sleepless vigils. In her hand, she clutched Seo-yun's silk hair ribbon, the one found near the damp gravel of the alleyway. When Tisyok entered, his footsteps heavy with the rage of a king who had failed to protect his heir, Yuna didn't turn. She simply let a single, silent tear track through her powder. "The doctors say she may never wake, Tisyok," she whispered, her voice a thread of spun glass. "My poor, sweet girl, to think. While we sat at the gala, those animals were breaking her." Tisyok's jaw tightened, the muscles ticking like a countdown. "I will have their heads. Every man involved in the raid on the docks will bleed for this." Yuna turned then, her movements slow, ethereal. She moved into his space, pressing her palms against his chest, feeling the frantic thrum of his heart. "The docks? No, my love. You know the hand-sung syndicate wouldn't be so bold. This was a message from the Kang family." Tisyok froze. "The Kangs, we have a treaty." "Treaties are for those who aren't ambitious," she countered, her voice hardening with a manipulative edge. She reached into her sleeve, pulling out a crumpled, mud-stained burner phone, the one Nia had planted in the alley hours before. "I found this near her. There are messages, Tisyok, coordinates to Kang's private warehouse. They didn't just want to hurt her. They wanted to show you that they could touch the thing you love most and walk away." She watched the shadow fall over his eyes, the total eclipse of reason. He didn't check the phone. He didn't need to. The grief she had mirrored back at him had become a lens, distorting his world until only violence remained. "They think I am old," Tisyok growled, his voice vibrating against her palms. "They think my mercy is a weakness." "Show them then," Yuna breathed, her fingers curling into his lapels. "Burn their world down. Don't leave a single stone standing for Seo-yun." As Tisyok stormed out, shouting for his captains to mobilize every soldier in the city, Yuna remained in the silent shrine. She exhaled, the grief evaporating from her expression to leave behind a mask of cold, clinical triumph. By morning, the Kangs would be decimated. Tisyok's best men would be dead or in prison, and the path to the throne would be clear. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 6, where the fallout of the war begins to reshape the city's power structure? The air in the security hub was thick with the hum of high-powered servers and the smell of stale coffee. Park Min-yi sat in the blue light of the monitors, his eyes bloodshot but focused. While the rest of the estate searched for ghosts in the garden, he was hunting for the digital footprints of a predator. He knew that even the most meticulous wolf eventually leaves a trail of fur behind. He bypassed the encrypted firewalls of Yuna's public accounts, diving instead into a ghost server she had accessed via a burner phone on the night of the abduction. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a soldier's precision translated into code. Finally, a series of transactions flickered onto the screen. They were disguised as luxury skincare purchases from a boutique pharmacy in Zurich, but Min-yi knew the street value of the chemicals hidden behind the fancy labels. He pulled up the chemical composition of the serum she had ordered. It wasn't a beauty product. It was a concentrated solution of vecuronium, a potent paralytic used in deep-sea surgeries. In small doses, it could mimic a total loss of consciousness. In larger ones, it would make a child appear dead to any untrained eye. "You didn't just bury her," Min-yi whispered, his jaw tightening as he traced the payment back to a secret offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "You drugged her so she couldn't even scream while the dirt fell." The paper trail was a map of cold-blooded intent. He found more. A transfer of $10 million to a private security firm specializing in disappearances, timed exactly 48 hours before the boss was due to return. Yuna wasn't just planning a murder. She was clearing the board for a total takeover of the Kang inheritance. A shadow moved behind him, and Minyi instinctively closed the tab, his hand hovering over his weapon. But it was only the reflection of the hallway light. The house felt like a pressure cooker, the silence a thin veil over a looming explosion. He downloaded the files onto a secure drive, the evidence of her sociopathy now distilled into a few gigabytes of data. He looked at the pink ribbon sitting on his desk, then at the digital ledger of a woman who had put a price tag on a 7-year-old's life. The boss was still out there, fueled by a righteous, misplaced fury, ready to kill the wrong people. Minyi knew he couldn't just show Tisiak the screen. In his current state, the boss might burn the evidence in a fit of disbelief. He needed to wait for the moment where the truth would hit with the force of a bullet. He tucked the drive into his inner pocket, the weight of it feeling like a loaded gun. The paper trail was complete. The wolf was trapped, she just didn't know it yet. The grand hall of the Kang estate was a cavern of mourning, draped in heavy black silk and choked by the cloying scent of thousands of white lilies. It was a funeral service for a child whose body had never been found, a memorial designed to bury the truth along with the memory. Kang Tisiak sat in the front row, his broad shoulders slumped for the first time in his life. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were hollow pits of grief. Beside him, Seo Yuna was a vision of tragic elegance, her face veiled in lace, her hand resting with predatory gentleness on his arm. "It's time, Tisiak," she whispered, her voice a soft, poisonous caress. "The empire cannot crumble because of our pain. Harin would want you to be strong. She would want the family legacy protected." On the mahogany table before them lay the succession papers, the legal tether that would bind the Mafia's vast assets to Yuna's name in the event of Tisiak's death or incapacitation. To Tisiak, it was a way to honor his daughter's memory by securing the future. To Yuna, it was the final nail in a coffin she had started building weeks ago. From the shadows of the mezzanine, Park Minyi watched the scene through the sights of his cold, professional gaze. He felt the weight of the digital drive in his pocket and the silent presence of Amal just behind the heavy velvet curtains. They were the only ones who knew that the memorial was a stage play, and the lead actress was about to take her final bow. Tisiak reached for the gold fountain pen, his fingers trembling. The air in the room seemed to vanish, leaving a vacuum of tension that made the candlelight flicker. He looked at the empty chair where his daughter should have been sitting, his heart a jagged ruin. "Sign it, my love," Yuna urged, her eyes gleaming with a light that didn't belong at a funeral. "Let the healing begin." The nib of the pen touched the parchment, the ink bleeding into the white surface like a fresh wound. Outside, a sudden, unnatural wind rattled the stained glass windows, and the heavy iron doors at the back of the hall began to groan. Tisiak paused, his brow furrowing as a strange, prickling sensation crawled up his spine, the instinct of a predator sensing a shift in the wind. He didn't sign. He looked up, his gaze fixing on the back of the room. Amal stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, her simple maid's uniform a sharp contrast to the sea of black silk. She wasn't carrying a tray or a basin. She was holding a small, delicate hand. "The healing doesn't start with a pen, boss." Amal's voice rang out, steady and defiant, cutting through the silence of the hall like a blade. "It starts with the truth." Yuna stood up, her face draining of color until she matched the lilies surrounding her. The trap was set, but the prey had just walked back from the dead. The heavy iron doors of the grand hall didn't just open, they groaned with the weight of a secret finally unearthed. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing half the candles and sending a shiver through the gathered mourners. Every head turned as Amal Johnson stepped into the light. She looked like a ghost hunter, but it was the small, fragile figure walking beside her that stopped the world's rotation. Harin was pale, her porcelain skin almost translucent against the dark wool of her oversized sweater, but she was standing. She was breathing. Tisiak froze, the gold pen slipping from his numb fingers and clattering onto the succession papers like a gavel. His heart, which had been a hollow stone for days, shattered and rebuilt itself in a single, agonizing beat. "Harin," he whispered, his voice cracking with a hope so sharp it was terrifying. Yuna let out a strangled, high-pitched sound, a sound of a predator that had just seen the dead rise. Her face, once a mask of icy composure, began to melt into a frantic, ugly panic. "No," she hissed, her fingers digging into the velvet of the table. "This is a trick, a hallucination. That isn't her." But the room knew the truth. As Amal led the child down the center aisle, the cloying scent of the lilies seemed to vanish, replaced by the sharp, real scent of the rain-soaked garden. Rin didn't look at her father yet. Her gaze was locked on the woman in the black lace veil. 10 feet from the table, Harin stopped. She took a ragged, shallow breath, the breath Amal had fought so hard to give back to her. Slowly, with a hand that shook with the weight of the dirt she had climbed out of, the 7-year-old girl raised her finger. She pointed it directly at Yuna's heart. "You," Harin whispered, the word rasping but clear in the sudden dead silence. "You pushed me in. You told me the earth would be my bed." The silence that followed was more violent than a gunshot. Tisiak turned his head slowly to look at his fiancée. In that moment, the tragic patriarch died and the ruthless Mafia boss returned. His eyes didn't soften. They turned into twin voids of absolute, frozen death. He saw the dirt still under Yuna's manicured nails. He saw the guilt written in the frantic twitch of her lip. Minyi stepped forward, tossing the digital drive onto the succession papers, covering the ink of the lie with the data of the truth. "The sedative purchase, boss, the offshore accounts, it's all there." Yuna tried to scream, to run, to plead, but Tisiak's hand was already around her throat, his grip a silent promise of the hell to come. He didn't look at his men or his guards. He looked only at Amal, who stood as the silent moral anchor of his home. "Take her to the car," Tisiak commanded his men, his voice a low, terrifying vibration that signaled the end of his mercy. "And make sure she learns exactly how long it takes to run out of air." He then dropped to his knees, not as a boss, but as a father, and pulled Harin into his chest. The wolf was gone, the miracle was complete, and for the first time in the history of the Kang Empire, the truth was the only power that mattered.